What's up, y'all? Welcome to Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today we're going to talk about class violence. But before we talk about class violence, I need you to do me a solid, all right? Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. When you never miss a video, and you support the channel. Also, share the videos. If you find some value in them, share them. Got to grow the channel so that we can create a bigger sphere of influence. All right, that's the whole idea, is to create awareness of issues that are of concern, in my personal opinion, to labor and the movement. All right. Today we're talking class violence. Do you know what class violence is? You ever heard that kind of terminology before? Class violence. I ain't talking about the fist fights in school. We're not talking about throwing the ones and twos in the classroom. We're not talking about the school shootings. That's not the class violence that I'm talking about. If you were to search Webster's dictionary, you'll not find a word that describes what class violence is. You will find class, the definition of class. You will find the definition of violence. You will find the definition of struggle, but you're not going to find the definition of class violence. You're not going to find a word to describe class conflict. You're not going to find it. All right. And as I went searching for something for this, I'm not that bright, you know what I'm saying? So if you found it, put it in the comments so that I know what word describes what I'm talking about. I was left to wonder, how is it that we have no word to describe the economic hostilities intentionally imposed on working people throughout the history of this great country and up until this very day? The economic hostilities that are always imposed on working people, always imposed on the working class, since forever. Every book I've ever read, it's always imposed on working people. So how don't we have a word for this? I'll give you a quick example of what I'm talking about, because maybe you think this is something from 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Maybe you don't realize that this is happening today. All right, I'll give you an example. Gas prices have shot through the roof at a time when Exxon, Mobil, and all these gas companies are making record profits. On top of that, America's the #1 exporter of oil. #1 at exporting oil. So how is it that our gas prices are shooting through the roof? How is that possible, right? That is intentional. The maximizing of profits at the detriment of the people. Now, you may think, well, these are companies, they're able to charge what they want, capitalism. But if that were the case, then they should not receive our subsidies. And subsidies are tax dollars that are given to these companies in order to do what they do. It helps lighten the economic burden for these wealthy people who have more money than God, and they need more of our money to keep them afloat. How much do you think we gave them in 2020? Whatever you think it is, you're thinking too low. Because when I looked it up, we gave them 5.9 trillion with a T, trillion dollars. In 2020, that comes out to about $11 million a minute for very wealthy people. The people couldn't even get a $2,000 stimulus check in the height of COVID, which we're still in the middle of. Couldn't even get a $2,000 check. But we can give these folks 5.9 trillion, $11 million a second. We've known since the 70s that these same tycoons have been destroying the climate and causing global warming. Scientists have been warning us, and Congress has known since the 70s. But what did we do? Congress lied, a lot of politicians lied about global warming, and if it was man-made, blah, 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 blah. They lied. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House, wanted to transition to renewable energy. What happened? He was mocked. And then the corporate-friendly Reagan came in and attacked the unions. Remember, he attacked the airline union, the airline tower, the tower unions. Attacked them. Fired them all. Banned them. And kept on ramping up that anti-union messaging. It's happened in the 80s. It's the, Reagan, the golden years of the Republican Party. Our government is bought. That's the conclusion I've come to. Our government is bought, and this started in 1976 with Buckley v. Valeo. This was a Supreme Court case in which the Supreme Court ruled in favor of unlimited spending by the candidate on campaigns. What this did was open the door for wealthy people to purchase their own campaigns and get into the seats of power where they can control the levers, write the laws, and fix the game in their favor. And they've been doing it since '76. This culminated in 2010 with Citizens United. Citizens United basically said corporations are people and the money they spend is their speech. Therefore, you cannot stop them from spending as much as they want. With that decision, the Supreme Court basically altered the Constitution. Because it's we the people, right? It's for the people, right? But when you define corporations as people and money as speech, what's the Constitution really defending? Think about that. We stopped being a democracy a while ago. We're an oligarchy. We are controlled. We are a government that is bought to govern for the wealthy, by the wealthy, of the wealthy. We are outsiders. We don't sign the donor checks. We don't sign those checks. So we're not part of that equation. You ever wonder why nothing gets done for the people, but everything gets done for the corporations? Now you know. When the donors are signing the checks and that's what's getting them into office, that's who they represent. They have no incentive to represent the people because the people ain't signing the checks. All we do is vote, and we vote with our hearts and we believe that something is going to happen for the betterment when we go to vote. But since '76, it's been something that has a little more influence than anyone's vote. Money. Class violence was and can be overt violence, like in the early days of the struggle. In the early days of the struggle, in the days of the Pinkertons, in the days of starting riots to attack strikers and breaking strikes with violence. But as times change, so too do the tactics. Once in power behind the levers, they started to write the rules to maximize gains and minimize losses. Class violence is the theft of $50 trillion from working people since the 1970s. There goes that number again, the 1970s. It's a key decade. 50 trillion. That's a lot of money. $50 trillion from working people to the 1% since the 1970s. That's the same 70s that saw the beginning of the Great Political Purchase that culminated in 2010 with Citizens United. Class violence is the 2008 financial crash that saw Wall Street get bailed out and Main Street get sold out. Do you remember the Occupy Wall Street movement? Class violence is the heartless COVID response that put profits over people and sacrificed 1 million Americans. We are visited with class violence all the time. Class violence is the underfunding of education, which is happening today. Every day we're visited with class violence, and many times, many workers foolishly say, "Thank you, good sir. Thank you so very much. Can I have another, please? A little more of that class violence. I'm really, really I'm digging this class violence. I really need some more of it, please." It's so frustrating. I gotta be honest with you, it's frustrating. You may be asking how, right? How are workers aiding and abetting their own mistreatment? How is it possible that workers are doing that? And if you ain't asking, well, I'm glad I'm asking. And I'll tell you how they're doing it. They're falling for the false comfort of centrism, that warm blanket of centrism. I don't want to get into an argument. I don't want to say something that might offend. I'm just going to play it safe and be in the middle of the road, this comfy middle of the road where nothing happens and everything's bland and we ain't got no seasoning on the food in the middle of the road. It's funny, I was having a conversation with my coworker the other night. We were waiting for our food. Ironically, we were waiting for our food. And we were talking about, kind of like why things don't get done. And he had made the suggestion that we needed to fire everybody in D.C. Fire them all. Let's get a whole new slate of people because these people are all corrupt. And I thought about it for a minute or two and I said, you know what? It wouldn't change anything if you just fired everybody and brought in a whole new field of people, because the donor class has purchased all of the fields. So when they come in with new people, those new people are still going to be purchased by the donor class that got them in there. So fundamentally, you have to change the system. You got to take away the incentive for the politician to be corrupt. And who has the will to do what politician is going to police themselves like that? So it's up to the people to make that demand. And every time we start to make those demands, there's some other distraction thrown at us to divide us up again. But it's that middle of the road thinking. Think about climate change, right? Think about that same very thing. Known about it since the 70s. Politicians are in place. They know about this crisis that's coming. And because oil has paid them all off, instead of doing something about it, one side of them creates a lie about it and sells that to the American people. The other side is feckless and can't get enough votes to pass legislation to try to correct the situation because they're also bought. So half of their party is also voting with the other side that is making up lies. And it's all in the interest of business. That's just a quick example, but there's so many in history that it's funny to me. So we fail to realize that, both political parties are bought by the wealthy and they govern for the wealthy. And the result is that the GOP legislates exclusively for the wealthy and the powerful corporations. They do this without a veil of secrecy. They don't fake it. They don't fake the funk. That's one thing you got to give the GOP credit for. They don't fake the funk. They tell you straight up they all about that big donor money, and that's who they represent. They tell you it all the time. And how do they stay in power? Well, it's an interesting question, right? If we're all starving and hungry, and we got to understand that we're all starving and hungry. We're all very, very lucky to not be starving and one accident away from being destitute. That's where we're all at. If you work for a living 5 days a week, that's where you're at, and you don't even know it. So how do they stay in power? Well, they sell racism and hate to give poor white folks the false sense that they have a better economic circumstance than minorities. It makes no sense. You look at the numbers. White people make up the largest race in this country. You don't think that they also make up the largest amount of poor people? You really, you think poor people are only minorities? That's nonsense. The majority of people that get WIC is not poor minorities, it's poor whites. But that doesn't even matter because they use race to divide us. So it's not even important. We're all struggling in poverty. If you're on welfare, guess what? You're struggling in poverty and the system's against you and it hurts and it sucks. But they're selling you some bull crap. They're selling us division. All of us, we're getting sold division. And that's not what it's about. It's meant to keep us divided. But the Dems aren't much better. They legislate also for corporations. The difference is they put up a veil that they're all for societal issues. They really care. They put up this veil. Oh, they do kneeling in kente cloth. Oh, I'm so with you. But they won't do anything legislatively. And you know how they get away with it? They have a few patsies that are told to go against whatever we're trying to get passed so it looks like we're fighting and you're the bad guy this time around. We'll rotate it to the next one and then you'll be the bad guy on the next bill. And that's how they keep this up. And they go, oh, we tried to, but we got this 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 senators that are siding with the Republicans. And oh, we can't get anything done. It's a dog and pony show. It's funny because it's wash, rinse, repeat. It happens over and over again. They're so inept that they can't even undo the damage from the previous administration. Think about that. Remember those taxes that got all screwed up so working people couldn't write off their travel expenses, their tools expenses, their dues expenses? Remember all of that? I went to do my taxes today. We have a new president. He's Democratic. We have a Democratic Congress, Democratic Senate. Guess what? Those taxes are the same. My write-offs are still not there. I still ended up hurt with this year's taxes. And it's not on the agenda. Why? Because working people don't matter in this country. It sucks. Sadly, many labor leaders also fall into this power-hungry trap. Many of them behave just like the politicians who have sold out the people. And so they sell out the membership. So what are the people left with? What are we left with? I don't know. But for me, if you're talking about politics, primaries are everything. Pay attention to the primaries. Pay attention to who's donating to these politicians. Pay attention to whether they're doing it publicly funded or whether they're accepting corporate money. If they're accepting corporate money, chances are they're going to vote in favor of corporations when it comes time for laws. So in the primaries, you have a chance to get someone who's not corrupt, at least to get it started with someone who's not corrupt, and maybe you have a fighting chance. If we get enough people that aren't corrupt into office, we have a fighting chance. But then we need legislation to get the corruption out of there. And that's going to be a mountain of a fight. But this is how you do it politically. That's how I do it. I don't know. I try to pay attention to who's financing them. And then I get behind the ones that are receiving the least amount of financing from corporations and big money interest. Staying informed is another key component. You got to stay informed by checking the bias of what is what I do anyway. I stay informed by checking the bias of what I consume. You got to understand my political views have changed over the years. I knew something was off my whole life, and it took me a long time to go through a lot of different ideologies to fall where I'm at. But you got to check the bias of what you consume. So if you read something and it makes you feel a certain way, or it's an opinion piece, check the author out and find out what type of things they support. It'll tell you what they're trying to sell you. Every writer is selling you a story. I read my collective bargaining agreement, so I'm informed on what my work situation is. I try to stay up on that. I read history books. My favorite one right now is Howard Zinn, People's History of the United States. I love that book. I go back to it often. I read articles. I watch documentaries about labor history and the struggle. I try to educate myself as best as I can. If I read a headline that strikes a chord and it makes me angry or it gets me emotional, I double check that story for accuracy, because a lot of times that's just clickbait and it's not really true, or it's skewed, or it's slanted and lied about, and it's triggering and it's meant to make you trigger. So I do that. We have to first realize that we're all living on the same floor. Everyone who works for a living, everyone who's Monday through Friday has a shift that they have to report to, otherwise they'll have economic problems. You're on the same floor. Never mind what team you're on. Let's start to realize that we're on the same floor. You know what I'm saying? Just because you make more money than another worker doesn't mean you're not on the same floor as that worker. You're on the same floor. And we need to realize that. We got to stop with this, oh, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, blah, 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 blah. Let's talk about the issues, and let's be humans, and let's figure out what the hell we're going to do, because if we're waiting for a Democrat or a Republican to save us, we're screwed. It's going to take all of us to move them to do the right thing on both sides of the aisle. It's ridiculous that we even have to talk about it. But yeah, we got to realize that we're on the same floor. And not only are we on the same floor, but when you look up at who's in power, it's the ruling class, and it's a boot that's crushing our dreams and our hopes. We have to realize our enemy is the greedy ruling class that is exercising the class violence against us and against all workers every day. We have to understand that the fight is not left versus right. I say it all the time. It's not left versus right, but rather the fight is the workers versus the owner class. And it has to be that, because it's just what it is. We have to understand that the labor is the sword of the people. The labor movement, that's the sword of the people. We are on the side of the people, and we have to, as labor people, we have to realize that as well. And we got to stay sharp. We have to see each other as siblings. We have to see each other as siblings and not just two distant strangers that are working on the same job site. When we do all of this, and we'll start to look up, and we'll recognize that the boot of the ruling elite is constantly crushing our hopes and our dreams, while sending us and selling us hate and division for each other. Demand more. If someone's in power to represent you, demand more of them, because they're not doing enough. If you're a labor leader who comes across this video and feels some type of way, don't get mad at the messenger. Change your behavior to transform the message that the messenger has to tell. Thanks for listening to my rant. It's just frustrating. Anyway, my name's Eric, man. You're watching Union Minded. Saying that we have a long way to go, but together, we'll get there. All right? The fight is not left and right. It's up and down. And it's going to take solidarity to win. Always. Peace.